Hearing none, the minutes as presented on the agenda will stand approved. Our next item on the agenda is an overview of parole presented by Parole Division Director, Mr. Renee Hinojosa. Mr. Hinojosa, please join us at the podium. And thank you so much for all that you do for us. We so appreciate you.
Thank you, Chair Johnson.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Chairman O'Daniel, Mr. Collier, members of the board. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to give a brief overview of the Parole Division this morning. Every division in TDCJ has their own mission statement, and Parole Divisions is up there. But what I like to say is the mission of the Parole Division is to help people who are coming out of the prison system into our communities find the right resources, the right programs, and the right treatment so they can be successful in the community. And we also hold them accountable when that needs to be done. If you look at parole in 2022, there's two sides of that coin. As you can see, we have our field operations on one side of the coin. That's kind of our bread and butter. That's where the rubber meets the road, and that's where the majority of our Parole Division staff work. In our field operations, we oversee or supervise almost 80,000 clients. We do that in 67 offices across the state and a little over 1,300 parole officers. What that slide doesn't tell you is that it should be about 1,450 parole officers, but we, like everyone else, struggles to hire people. Everyone on the right side of that, our central operations, or the other side of that coin, in some way, form, or fashion, supports the field. This is a breakdown of our regions. Parole has 5 regions. Region number 1 is our East Texas region. It's headquartered in Tyler, Texas. Region number 2 is in our Metroplex area, in our Dallas-Fort Worth area. It's headquartered in Dallas, Texas. Region 3 is in Houston and the surrounding counties. Region 4 is our South Texas region. It's headquartered there in San Antonio. And Region 5 is headquartered right here in Lubbock, Texas. If you look at the diagram up there, all that blue, Region 5 is our largest geographical region with a little over 100 counties. But it's actually our smallest when it comes to our client population. Our largest is Region 2 with our client population, a little over 20,000 clients in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So when somebody comes out on parole, they're placed on one of 7 caseloads. And what determines that is usually maybe the crime they commit or the parole board vote that they receive to be released, or in some cases a special condition that they receive from the board. That determines the caseload that they're on. We also determine the supervision level, and we do that by using the Texas Risk Assessment System, or what we like to call the TRAS assessment. That tells us their risk level. It also tells us their needs. If you see that big blue shade, it's supposed to be blue, that big blue shaded area there is a little over 80% of our population fall under 3 categories. Our regular caseload, our therapeutic community or our substance abuse caseload, and our district resource center caseload. All the other smaller pieces of the pie, the smallest one there on the right is our super intensive supervision program. Next to that is our electronic monitoring. Then you have our sex offenders and our special needs population. Determining what caseload they're on and the supervision level is not the only thing we do. They have to have services, they have to have treatment, programs, resources in the community, and our specialized programs section oversees all that. We at times deliver the services ourselves, but most of the time we partner with community partners, different divisions like our reentry division, our rehabilitation programs division, Texas Workforce Commission, volunteer groups in the community. We can't do it alone. You know, you've heard the saying, it takes a village to raise a child. It really takes a village to help somebody be successful in the community. And we owe it a lot to our partners in the community that provide these services. Our review and release processing section, I like to call them the alpha and the omega of our parole review process. The first bullet there, the Central File Coordination Unit, actually begins their job as soon as an inmate hits the system. They maintain our physical files for everyone that's coming up for parole review. That's for anyone that entered the system before 2006. If somebody entered the system after that, they have an electronic file, and we update those as well. One of the programs or the projects that they're working on currently is converting all of the physical files into electronic files. It's a huge project, if you can imagine, over 100,000 physical files. So CFCU, as we like to call them, if they are the alpha, case analysis is the omega, it's the end. They're the ones that make sure all the boxes are checked before somebody gets issued a certificate. They ensure that they have a home plan to go to. They ensure that we have proper referrals to special conditions for the board to review. They work hand in hand with our classification and records department within CID to ensure that we release the right person at the right time. And if they don't have a home plan and they need somewhere to stay, our Huntsville placement and release, get them a plan at one of our residential reentry centers. So that's their main function. It's our goal that everyone on parole never gets arrested again or never violates parole, but we know that's not reality. Our Warrants Section reviews all violation reports that are recommended for warrant issuance, and they make a determination whether a warrant should be issued or not on that particular client. Because we have the authority to issue warrants, we have the responsibility to confirm the warrant within 10 minutes if law enforcement has somebody pulled over on the side of the road or contacts us. And the way we do that is by operating 24/7, 365 days a week, or 365 days a year. Our command center also looks at all violations for the GPS monitored clients after hours, and they validate those or issue warrants as needed. Anything that has to do with a warrant gets entered into the National Crime Information Center, as we call it, the NCIC, and that is done by our TLETS unit. So they do that, and they're operating 24 hours a day as well. Our newest section is the Oversight Section. They were created in 2020 specifically to funnel and triage all of our oversight and our reports within the parole division. Prior to their existence, we would have an oversight report that could be looked at different levels of supervisors, 4 or 5 duplicate types of reports, very inefficient. Never really got to the bottom of issues or problems in a timely manner. But after the creation of the Oversight Division, or the Oversight Section, that really helped us get to where we needed to be. They've been very instrumental in streamlining our reports, analyzing and identifying what's critical and what needs to be taken care of immediately. They've also helped us with special projects like our overtime analysis. We've been able to sharpen up our processes because of the Oversight Section. Some of the things that we've improved on is interviewing the inmates that get arrested more in a timely manner, scheduling the hearings for those that need a pre-revocation hearing or revocation hearing more quickly, and entering our data into our system for new arrivals. And you see the chart there, they've actually helped us reduce overtime by almost 20%.
That's great.
Process improvements in our DNA, that's what we like to do. We try to figure out how to get better every day. One of the things that we've improved upon here in the last year or so is our pre-revocation process and our warrant issuance process. We like to call that our 41-day process. Prior to October of 21, a client that picked up a new charge, whether it be a misdemeanor or a felony, was automatically issued a blue warrant. It'd sit in the county jail and wait to the adjudication of that charge, and then we would take them through the revocation process. That sometimes took weeks, it sometimes took, depending on where they were, it could take months. We don't do it that way anymore. We identify each individual, what the issue was, what the violation is, and we determine at the beginning if we're going to issue that warrant and take them through the process. And in doing so, we've effectively reduced the number of clients in the county jail. If you can see that graph there, September 1, we had over 6,000 people in the county jail on blue warrants. As the beginning of January of this year, that number dropped almost 40%. That's huge. Another thing that we revitalized or looked at was our Superintensive Supervision Program, or the SISP policy. This policy was created in the 1990s to be very restrictive and to have our highest risk clients kind of at home and not very reentry friendly. We were challenged by Mr. Carter to take a look at that and figure out how we can be better, and we've done that. We supervise them by their TRAS level. If they're low on SISP, they get more pro-social activity time. That's something new that they didn't have before, and so we're very proud of that. One of the other things that we have looked at is contact standards. If our resources are limited, where should we spend our time? And that's with our high-risk clients. So that's what we're doing. As we move forward, obviously we're going to continue to evaluate everything we do, specifically our contact standards and the requirements that we currently have, and change those to be more to today's standards. Our caseload ratios, what should it look like in 2022 and moving forward? And we're very close in implementing our new caseload residential reentry center, so we're going to have a total of 8 caseloads when that gets implemented. And we're going to evaluate and change our intake process. We've talked about this for a little while, and when somebody comes into our prison system, they stay at an intake unit for about 45 days. When somebody comes out of the prison system, they get about an hour with the parole officer kind of going over questions, and it just doesn't seem right, so we're going to fix that. And I think what the most important thing is we're going to do in the future is change our culture. Do something that's more about the people and less about the paper, and be about the staff and our clients so they can be successful. And I think the video we're about to watch is the reason I get up every morning, because I think that the parole division can make a difference in helping people change their lives. And we're about to see a client that's out of our Austin office, Mr. Oliver, tell us his story. Well, maybe not. As they're looking through that, that's a quote from Mr. Oliver on the screen there. Parole has afforded me the opportunity to make a difference in their life. He works for a company that hires at-risk youth to try to get them jobs, as I've made a difference in mine. I hope, if we can't get the video up, it is on YouTube. I recommend that. If you get an opportunity to see it, it really makes a difference, and it really tells us why the parole division goes to work, and everybody really here in Tdcj, why we go to work every day.
And also why we're working, well, is it gonna work?
No, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
A couple of questions. I am very impressed that you all are able to confirm warrants within 10 minutes. I know you have so many throughout the whole state. You have 5 regions. How are you able to do that?
We have dedicated staff, and they come to work every day, and just knowing the mission and what we have to do. And even in Snowvid 2020, we had people sleeping at the headquarters because we couldn't get replacements there. We have, like I said, we have people that understand what the role is, and we do it every day.
Yeah. Now, I can imagine how many warrants those are, but just for the board, you tell them about how many warrants are you all confirming on a weekly basis, monthly basis. Got to be up there. I mean, you may not know the exact number, but just give them an idea of how many warrants you are confirming within 10 minutes. That got to be, I mean, tremendous.
Yes, ma'am. It was about 29,000 last year.
29,000.
And
Wow.
one of our goals is to absolutely get that reduced.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions from members of the board?
Thank you.
I had one last
Oh, I'm
question.
sorry.
You said you're going to convert your physical files into electronic files.
Yes, ma'am.
You know, you have an idea in terms of when that might happen, the deadline for that?
It's going to be on our 2030 plan to get it done before then, but I believe when it started a couple of years ago, it's if you can imagine how big these files are, some of our clients or inmates that have been in the system multiple times, we actually have box files, multiple box files, where that client has so many protest letters and so many, whatever the case might be. We have to scan each of those documents, so it's quite extensive. I think it initially started as a 10 or 15 year project.
Wow.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hinojosa, thank you so very much. As I said to you earlier, we just simply appreciate you and appreciate all your hard work. We just thank you so much.
Thank you.
Be blessed, okay?
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. There being no further business, the Texas Board of Criminal Justice Community Correction Committee is now adjourned. It is now 9:31 a.m.
Meeting of the Texas Board of Criminal Justice Correctional Institutions Committee is called to order in accordance with Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code, the Open Meetings Act. A quorum of the committee is present, and the meeting is now declared open. It is 9:32 a.m. The first item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. Are there any amendments or objections to the proposed minutes as presented? Hearing none, the minutes as presented on the agenda will stand approved. Our next item on the agenda is the presentation on suicide prevention from Research and Development Director Andrew Barby and Victim Services Deputy Director Mary Mccafferty. Please join us at the podium.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, board members, and Mr. Collier. We appreciate the opportunity to report to you on the Deputy Suicide Project. I am Mary Mccafferty, the Deputy Division Director for Victim Services, and I'm joined here with some members of the project team as well as 2 senior wardens. And we're going to tell you a little bit about our work at preventing suicide at Tdcj.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board, Director Collier. I'm Andrew Barby with the Research and Development Team at Texas Department of Criminal Justice. So how did this start? Every state in the country right now, their correctional systems have been experiencing a rise in the number of inmate suicides. And unfortunately, we have, like all of the other states, experienced that. A couple of years ago, the Texas Department of Criminal Justice began sending teams of deputy division directors to units after we would have one of these incidents. That effort was very important. Deputy directors, it's important to understand, are uniquely positioned. They have a tremendous amount of experience with the agency, and because of where they're at, they're well positioned to convey findings, what we're learning about the way we run our business to leadership. And so that effort began a couple of years ago to try to bring some better clarity and trying to understand what's going on with this very serious challenge. About a year ago, in addition to that, Director Collier challenged the research and development team to, in addition to what was happening with the visits to the units by the deputy division directors, what can we, from a research perspective, understand a little bit better about this challenge? And so with that challenge, the research and development team began to dig very deeply into this issue, looking both in terms of the research literature, but also our own data. And about a little over 9 months ago, the early summer of 2021, those 2 efforts essentially came together. The efforts of those deputy division director reviews at the unit and the research efforts that had been undertaken came together to create this project that we're now here sharing with you, the Deputy Suicide Prevention Project. And that's what we're going to talk to you about in more detail today.
Good morning. My name is Eric Guerrero. I'm one of the Deputy Division Directors for the Correctional Institutions Division. And just kind of a little quick overview and background about myself. I have 28 years with the agency. I've been a warden for 5 years on several facilities across the state. I was the Region 6 Director for 3 years. I was the Training Director for the Correctional Training Staff Development for 3 years. And I've been the Deputy Division Director for 2 years. Suicide, as we know, is one of the top 10 causes of death for the United States of America. It's one of the top reasons for death in Tdcj. And so in saying that, Mr. Collier and Mr. Mendoza had a vision about putting a team together of deputy division directors to look at the issues within our facilities. And in that vision, we want to look at tools that we can provide to the unit wardens and the staff out there in the fields to prevent self-harm and suicides. And so this team was made up of, like you said, Victim Services, Mary Mccafferty, a Deputy Division Director, Andy Barby, the Research and Development Director. But there's also other members of this team. Dr. Alice Castleberry in the bottom, 17 years of mental health experience. She's been the last 4 years of our licensed psychologist for the agency. We have Travis Turner. He's a Deputy Division Director of the Administrative Review and Risk Management. Prior to that role, he served in the CID division as a member of our classification records department. And he spent over 12 years in that area. And he understood the type of inmates we were receiving from the county jails and the type of inmates we were putting out there on the facilities. We have Charlene Threntham. She's a Deputy Division Director in the Training and Leader and Development Division. A lot of experience in multiple different divisions in our agency. Been in the training and leader development. She has that knowledge of what needs to be trained out there in the field. If it's to our pre-service cadets, it's to our in-service staff, to our non-security staff. So she has that vision that she can provide information out to the field. And the last three I want to mention is members that are in different divisions besides myself, but had a role in the CID division. Bill Lewis, he's a Deputy Division Director in the Manufacturing, Agribusiness and Logistics. He has 38 years with the agency. He was a senior warden for 12 years. A lot of knowledge that he was able to provide to the team. Ronald Givens, a Deputy Division Director for the private facilities. And then myself, and Ron also with 28 years of experience. He was a senior warden on multiple facilities. He was a Region 3 Director for over a year, and now currently a Deputy Division Director for the Private Facilities Contract Monitoring and Oversight Division. And then I guess myself, Eric Guerrero, in the CID Division. The last three had a lot of knowledge about what's going on in the prisons, but we had to form a team together to listen to each other to see how we can prevent suicides in the future. So these members have done a lot of work on moving forward to prevent suicides.
So our goals of the team and the vision of executive leadership and our charge for the group was to ensure this multidisciplinary approach, to really value all of the different perspectives that the team members brought to the table, some fresh eyes, new ideas, kind of innovation, allowing space for that innovation to rise out. We sought to identify gaps in our understanding about suicide, what risk and protective factors there are for inmates at TDCJ, gaps in our processes and our procedures, and gaps in collaboration between all of the different partners at our correctional facilities that must work together to prevent suicide. We worked to craft solutions which involved removing silos that may inherently rise up in an agency of this size. We want to break those down to ensure that we're working together in partnership. And we want to really increase support to our correctional facilities and staff, getting the tools to the field so that they can be successful in preventing suicide. Another major goal for the team is to address trauma at the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. So we have a great deal of organizational trauma that's inherent in corrections work, but we also have staff who may be tired, they're working short, they may be suffering from fatigue and burnout, and we need to do more to support them in their work in corrections. We also want to make sure that we are responding appropriately to critical incidents and supporting our staff who have experienced responding to a critical incident, ensuring that they have the skills and the support they need to cope with that experience. Next slide, please. So the efforts of the team are an ongoing process of learning, listening, educating, and collecting feedback. And we're nowhere near done, but this is kind of the circle of the process that we've undergone in the last year. So we started learning by doing a variety of site visits, really getting out there, making sure we had a good understanding of what the problem of suicide was at TDCJ, not assuming that we knew what the problem was, but really listening and observing it ourselves. We also did a deep dive into the data, as Mr. Barby mentioned, and he's going to give you some detail about that, so that we really had a full picture of what caused or might attribute to inmate suicide at TDCJ. We also did a significant amount of listening. We convened a panel of wardens, 12 from the Correctional Institutions Division and 3 from our private facilities, to be a sounding board for the team so that we could bounce ideas off of them, get feedback, ask if we were going in the right direction, and listen to their ideas and suggestions. And we also did interviews with staff from cadets all the way up through executive leadership to really hear from the field about what their challenges and barriers were to successfully preventing suicide. Then we spent a lot of time educating. We educated ourselves within the team, did a lot of healthy debate, arguing, sharing our different experiences and perspectives, which really enhanced our team and really helped bring everybody's voice out. And we also did group presentations for the leadership forums with our senior wardens, assistant wardens, and majors. And then we solicited feedback from them. We did that by breaking them into roundtables and allowing them to engage one-on-one with a team member to give us direct feedback about the direction we were going and the things that they needed. And we did anonymous surveys so that we could hear from the field about what they needed, what they thought we were doing right, what was working and what wasn't. Asking questions was key, and being willing to listen was especially important.
And so to complement that, we were also doing a lot of research. And I think it's important to really highlight that in addition to the research, we had this parallel track of more qualitatively just getting out in the field, talking with people that are experiencing this every day. But the research was very important. As I mentioned, it was about a year ago that Director Collier challenged us to dive deeply into this and learn what we could. What are other states experiencing? Are there solutions that are being proven effective out there in the field? And I wish that I could tell you that there is a robust collection of research and literature demonstrating how state corrections agencies have tackled this challenge, but there is not. There is not. There's a fair amount of research on this issue with respect to jails, but jails are very different than state prison systems. There's a fair amount of research on this that comes from Europe, but there's really not much in the way of state prison system-oriented research that's in this country. So we were really starting kind of from ground zero. What we were able to find once we started looking at the data is that there are some patterns. We were not really sure if we would find anything when looking at the data. In fact, when we began this, one of the first things that we did before we even looked at any of the data was to visit with and spend time talking with mental health experts, the people that are on our units trying to provide the services to this particular population. And many of them anecdotally said, you're probably not going to find patterns. All of these events are so unique to one another, so idiosyncratic that there's really not any kind of common themes. But we found early on in our analyses that in fact there are some common themes. And so with the background that a number of us have in risk assessment, we pretty quickly identified that there is something here to keep looking at. There is something worth continuing to understand about the data. And so what we have been able to do is create a tool that packages, we have essentially about 15 different factors. We've identified those as statistically significant predictors of inmates who are likely to try to hurt themselves. And we have basically transformed this into a tool that every 24 hours looks at every one of those factors for every single one of our inmates and provides an updated, no older than 24 hours old picture of what that looks like. And this is information that we are now actually pushing to units. What this is really important about is it begins to create a new opportunity for wardens and their leadership team at the units to have more crystallized information about who it is that they might need to put a little bit of extra attention to. So this tool, this research that the agency has been able to do, and with our partners and all of the other divisions have been able to deploy, we're literally only a week or two into it, but we think it's going to be a very significant development for our ability to understand who do we need to be paying attention to at the units.
Some of the lessons learned, as Mary said, there were several debates and arguments, and she's very true about that. especially with the background that we have in that Deputy Suicide Project team. And one of the main things was just to listen to understand, not just within the group, but as Mary has mentioned, about listening to the staff out there in the field. If it was leadership forums with the wardens and the majors, but also going out to the facilities and talking to that first line staff, you know, those officers and those supervisors that are dealing with it on a daily basis, talking to the inmate population, seeing the information we can gather from them to help us on the team, asking those difficult questions out to the field. You know, we know we're shorthanded statewide, and that's causing some issues also in supervising the population. But what can we do for them? Asking those senior wardens, as we mentioned, we have 2 senior wardens here today. What can we do to help you so we can help prevent suicide and self-harm in our population? Challenging the way we've always done it. We've took a dive into our 24-hour building schedule and to see what we need to do to change that building schedule, if it's our count procedures, if it's our security checks. So there's a lot of things that we have learned throughout the process, and I think moving forward, that's going to help us on preventing suicides.
So the strategies we've deployed so far are revamping and improving our training and education. This starts from pre-service and goes on all the way through retirement. It's an ongoing education effort, and we need to increase understanding and awareness, not only with our staff, but also our inmate population. So we're developing educational material to inform and help our inmate population really understand what suicide risk looks like and how to help somebody who might be at risk, how to talk to somebody about suicide. We've also developed some unit-based pilots that you're about to hear about that involves better identification of at-risk inmates, engagement strategies with those at risk, improving collaboration between partners at the unit level, and then modifying operations to give our staff more time back to be engaged one-on-one with at-risk inmates. We've also worked to improve our support to staff after a critical incident, making sure that we have quality peer support and resources available to educate staff about what to expect and how to cope with those experiences, and then infusing wellness initiatives into pre-service and all the way through retirement to make sure that our staff are well equipped to be successful working in corrections and at home as well.
Good morning. My name's Ellie Townsend. I'm the warden at the Michael unit. And to be a warden part of the panel, very fortunate for what we can bring to the Michael unit throughout this agency. And to speak on the support side, I'm all for anything we can do to save a life, because it's a life. It's not an inmate, it's not an employee, it's a life. But the support, that's what probably really hit me hard when looking at it, because I look back on suicide events, and unfortunately I've been part of quite a few. And I look back in the past, and I can definitely find the stuff, the things that we could be better at, that we could do, and hey, we may have failed here and there, but never looked at the front end, the support for our staffs, our inmate, and the inmate families. To be better, we got to be better for our people. We got to be better for the inmate population and the families. And when it comes to staff, to just give an example, I've had an employee that's done chest compressions on an inmate that did chest compressions on their loved one to save their life. I did not know that. So them and what they were dealing with is very traumatic. And I didn't provide the necessary resources I needed to help them along the way. Now looking forward to being able to look at a person and say, how can I help you? And they actually saying, well, you can, and then get in touch with the right people that can go a little further than what I can offer is where we're going, and the follow-up there. And there's a lot of buy-in from staff to make a better employee to be on the front end of looking for signs of suicide. It just makes better there. And to the inmate population, and when an incident occurs, instead of just everything gets removed and we forget about them, now putting something to them to check on their well-being to, maybe we're preventing something else from occurring down the run. So putting back to them, and then, for me and being a senior warden, taking the responsibility to talk to an inmate family member when such incident occurs, nor do I ever want another one. But when they do, it's my responsibility, and how can I help them navigate through instead of just trying to, hey, that's somebody else's call, I don't want to be a part of that. Taking those steps is, and it's hard to measure, because you don't know really who you may have saved in doing those things, but I know staff have become more responsive. Inmates, they'll speak up when somebody will say in a prison setting that you may not have somebody jump out there and speak up saying, I need help from an inmate side after seeing something like that. Oh, they're doing it, and they appreciate the help that's given there. Nursing staff, you know, nurses, they're trained to deal with this type of stuff, understandable, but does it make it right when you deal with such bad incidents? No. So to be able to provide something for them to help them just makes for, like I say, a better employee to the inmate population, makes for taking care of their well-being all the way to the inmate families. So support definitely jumped out there and got my attention, and that's something I'm full steam ahead of there.
So this is not an academic exercise. And no offense, I've been a part of many academic exercises, but this is not that. It cannot be that. And so what we're going to spend the bulk of this presentation talking to you about is, so what's going to prevent this from being just an academic exercise? What are we going to do with what we think we have learned and how to move forward? And so there's an 8-part strategy that we have put together. And when I say we, it's critical to understand that this came really from the wardens and their teams, from listening to them, from talking to them, from learning from the realities in the field, as opposed to a top-down. This is nothing that we read about in a pamphlet or in a couple of books and have decided to impose upon the field. This is a field-up set of strategies that are being implemented. So it starts with this identification tool I spoke briefly about, and I won't go over that again, but again, we now have every 24 hours the ability to provide to every single one of the wardens in the field, this is what your inmate population looks like, and the share of your inmate population that is popping on these factors that we know are correlated with the likelihood to try to hurt themselves. That information will flow into the second part on this, an office. And that office is a centralized location there at the unit, and think of it as a hub for centralizing this very critical information. Which of our inmates are at risk for trying to hurt themselves? What types of resources do we have at this unit, whether they be people resources, treatment resources? Every unit is a little bit different. So it's important to have an office at the unit that is a hub for centralizing and not only who, but the strategies that are going to be deployed and how are those strategies working. We have the third part here is we've created an indicator. So you might appreciate our system relies on a lot of people looking people up in computers. So a lot of looking somebody up on a computer screen to find out what's their offense, what's their disciplinary history, do they traffic in contraband? Well, we now will let those staff know, is this someone who's been identified as at risk for harming themselves? So that's information that's going to be visible to people that are very critical in understanding who the inmates are that they're working with. The use of inmate peers at the units. Warden Townsend and Warden Sanchez will talk more about this, but that is a resource that we can tap into. The majority of our inmates, they want to do their time, pay their penalty, and move on and become better people. And so we can take advantage of some of that inside of our units and let them help one another. Multiple CDO. CDO means constant direct observation. And typically, the way that works, if you have an inmate that needs that, you have to devote one correctional officer to that inmate. So if you have 10 inmates in your unit that need that, that is 10 correctional officers devoted only to that. Well, the idea is let's create an opportunity where one correctional officer can conduct that constant direct observation on more than one inmate at a time. So that's in development. And then the items 6, 7, and 8, basically all of these are about let's scrutinize our traditional way of doing business. Not because we're convinced anything is wrong, but the understanding that if we're going to have better performance in the future, which is always our objective, we have to be willing to look at the way we do business. And are there things we can do more efficiently and more effectively? So this is really the excitement of this project.
Yeah, I know Mr. Barby went through that, and for the Michael unit, I'm going to speak really just to number 2 and number 4 on the self-harm prevention office. Brand new, all devoted to self-harm, not a collateral duty. It is 100% towards the self-harmer. Right now, I have one correctional officer in there that works with 20 inmate peers, and The inmate peers for the Michael unit, and I know he'll speak for the McConnell, very important to us. Being short-staffed, trying to find where can we bridge a little bit of that gap and not miss out. And the inmate peers, have done a phenomenal job in that, and especially working hand in hand with our self-harm office. Those inmates are our inmate peers, which on the Michael unit consist of field ministers, life coaches, peer educators, and peer support coaches. 20 inmates that are allowed to tier walk. But those inmates, that's where they live. And some of them doing large time. They're for the betterment of the environment they live in. So hopefully that's 20 inmates I don't have to worry about doing other things, and they want to make the environment they live in a lot better. They have the time. They don't have to perform a security check. They don't have to put a meal out. They have the time to spend that 15 minutes talking to somebody and can relate due to past experiences. Now, are there some inmates that may not want it? Very much so. Majority of them love to be able to talk to them, appreciate that. The self-harm office, where it's going to look different going forward, and I'm going to use just McConnell, for example. If he were to get an inmate from me right now, we're able to see disciplinary, we're able to see work, housing, family history screen, stuff like that. But there's nothing that really gets inside of, what's that person's behavior if they have anything of past loss. So we're building files on inmates. So if an inmate lost his mother in November, we can document that as a period. We may need to be talking to them more, setting up some kind of profile, just interacting with them more. That gets transferred to him. As soon as he gets that inmate, he can look at that, and we don't miss out on that date when that inmate's mother was lost, and we can be right there trying to provide that extra support. Same with being consistent on the way we train through to all our correctional officers and staff. Instead of have different shifts and different people, that self-harm office, we can be consistent in the training and education that we're giving the people. But those are the two I want to speak on the Michael.
Good morning. I'd like to thank the good Lord for giving me the opportunity to be here with you today. Jerry Sanchez. I've been with the Texas Department of Criminal Justice for 26 years. I've had an opportunity to work on several different facilities. I'm currently, as Townsend was saying, at the Michaels unit as a senior warden. And just to add, in regards to the self-harm prevention office, you have to have qualified individuals there. It's a new initiative. You want to make sure that you're able to build upon that. At my facility, I have a designated captain that works at office who has the tactical awareness and operational awareness to overcome almost all challenges. He's respected by his peers. He can overcome challenges, and it's just that type of caliber that I want in that type of office. The office does receive the information, they gather it, they sort it, and they redistribute it. It's just a great thing. Every unit is unique in itself. The McConnell unit has a large offender base, bunch of believers that believe in different types of religions, and we capitalize on that. We use a lot of faith-based programs. We use a lot of field ministers. They go out there and they capture the heart and souls of these individuals so that they know that they're significant. They know that somebody cares about them. And I can tell you that the involvement of these individuals, my expectation in the involvement is to have positive interaction so that they can curb their behavior, so that we have a fighting chance to save as many lives as possible. In addition to that, we also use the peer educators, the life coaches, and it's just been a great program. All of them are working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on different schedules. And they go out there and they save lives. It's a wonderful thing.
And I want to touch on the number 5, the multiple CDOs, the constant direct observation. Just to give you an idea, there's only 5 intake facilities across the state that receives inmates for crisis management. That's here in the Region 5 area, we have the Montford facility here in Lubbock. We also have the Clements unit in Amarillo. We have, for the female facilities, the Mountain View facility in Gatesville, Skyview in Rusk, Texas, and down in Region 3, we have the Scott facility down there in Houston. As you know, we have multiple inmates who, for some reason, commit self-harm, and we have to put them on a wait list to go to a crisis management bed. And a lot of times, there's not beds available. So we discussed about a multiple CDOs on these facilities. For the Michael facility, we're looking at an area in the multipurpose room in 7 building where we can put 7 or 8 holding areas for one officer. At the McConnell unit, we looked at 12 building, an old shift turnout room. Again, we can place 7 or 8 holding areas for these inmates are awaiting crisis management. So that's the vision for having a multiple CDO. And again, talking about the self-harm prevention office, the 2 pilot programs, but we're also looking at other facilities across the state to also have this office too.
So just in rounding things out, the key takeaways are you need both data, but you also need to be in the field. You have to be talking with the people that are running the system day in and day out. Big takeaway right there. Second takeaway is that we have to understand that this is not going to be a cookie cutter type approach. Every one of our units brings unique, distinct challenges to the equation. And so we have to trust the wardens and their leadership teams to craft and shape strategies that will be effective at their units, because every unit is going to be a little bit different. And then moving forward, we're going to have to monitor these efforts. We're starting with baby steps, not doing this at 99 units, for example. We're talking about 2 to 5 units initially. And we're going to have to learn from this and grow it and move it forward. But the multidisciplinary aspect of this is arguably the most important. Opening up the hood, so to speak, lifting the hood and letting other people look at how you run your business, do your business practices. And the respectful way that we have engaged in those conversations and challenged one another has really created an opportunity for Tdcj to be an even better agency, to do an even better job at carrying out the mission that the state of Texas asks us to carry out. So lastly, before we get to any questions, I would just ask our team if they have any particular singular takeaways that you would like to share with the members of the board.
Just the one thing, kind of how I started off, a life's a life. It don't matter if you're wearing white, you're wearing clothes that we're wearing. We've got to do better. I'm not going to say that we've been a failure. We've just got to do better in finding new ways as things get diverse. I'm 100% on board, as well as the micro unit staff are 100% on board, and to the inmate population of doing better for everybody.
I can tell you personally, it's just an exciting time for me. I get to be part of a project that's changing our approach on saving lives. That's just amazing. You know, there's a big push on staff and inmate wellness, and that's just a great thing. I also want to tell you that I'm very honored to be part of this team and the mission that we're doing. I'm very honored to be part of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice as they pave the way with this new initiative. So to answer the questions, my heart and soul is on fire.
And we thank executive leadership for convening us and giving us the opportunity to present to you. And we appreciate the Correctional Institutions Division as well as the Private Facilities Division and allowing us to engage and really deep dive into their business process and hopefully improve outcomes for the agency. Any questions? Yes.
I just wanted to make a general comment first. And during this presentation, I thought I had Banquo's ghost sitting next to me, because as I have said in the past, given COVID, I'm just keeping our head above water chairman. But before me, there was another chairman, Justice Wainwright, and he had a saying, which was, we don't tread water in this agency. And I think he would be very proud of what y'all are trying to accomplish here today, as are all of us, because you are definitely not treading water. Mr. Collier?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to say personally to the team, thank you for all your work. I know not everybody on the team is here, but I saw this presentation at the American Correctional Association, and within 10 minutes of watching it, went and called the chairman and said, you need to see this. It's just that good. And it's really reflective of good work from all across the agency, where other divisions are joining in, and you can see the horsepower that comes to be when we put those teams together. And I think just you're unstoppable, and I just want to tell you thank you, and I'm very proud of the work that you do. I also want to recognize Mr. Mendoza, because even though he's not part of the presentation, he's been not just a silent partner, but a very active partner working with all of our deputy division directors on this project as well as other projects that we've engaged our deputy division directors on. So thank you, Oscar, and thanks to all the division directors that have helped on this as well. So hats off, outstanding job.
Thank you, sir.
I'd like to make a comment. First of all, thank you so much, Warden Townsend, for the tour. It was amazing to get to meet your team of peers and field ministers. And after talking with them for a very short period of time, it was clear that they are all on board with this and excited about making a difference in their community. And I commend you for your leadership in initiating the pilot. And for the entire committee, as an academic and a mental health professional, what I'm seeing is innovation, but innovation done right, which is getting input from stakeholders, thinking about things outside the box, looking at research and data, but making sense out of it rather than just charging forward with, okay, we're going to throw something together and put on a show. So I just want to thank you and commend you all. I cannot imagine a more exciting time to be a member of the board and be able to support what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other? Yes.
Just a comment. I am very involved in the suicide prevention program at the unit level, at the Clements unit. And under the leadership of Region 5 Director David Blackwell, this is being taken very serious, and things are happening. And just a comment, our chaplains and our field ministers are the tip of the spear on this. And so thank God that we're doing these things. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? No? If not, thank you very much for an outstanding presentation. I want to just underline what Mr. Collier said. This is a wonderful presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There being no further business, the Texas Board of Criminal Justice Correctional Institutions Committee is now adjourned. It is... Well, it is going to be something here in just a second, if I can figure this out. It is 10:07. Justice is called to order in accordance with Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code, the Open Meetings Act. During this meeting, the board will be conducting business from the agenda posted in the Texas Register. Members of the board present for this meeting include Vice Chairman Daryl Avery, Secretary Pastor Larry Miles, members Judge Faith Johnson, Judge Molly Francis, and Eric Nichols. A quorum of the board is present and the meeting is now declared open. It is 10:15. Pastor Miles, will you open up our meeting with the word of prayer?
Yes, sir. Please join me in prayer. Father God, we come before you this morning. And Lord, as we come before you, Lord, we lift up the people of Ukraine. Lord, we ask that you help these people, comfort these people, Lord. We don't understand this situation, Holy Lord, but we know that you do. And Lord, we look to you to help these folks, Lord. We also, Lord, lift up the victims of crime. And Lord, we ask that you touch them and help them, Lord God. Comfort them as only you can, Lord God. Lord, we ask your continued blessing upon Tdcj, the leadership, the correctional officers, the families, the inmates, their families. Lord, we ask your protection and your blessing upon them, Lord. Bless this time. Give us wisdom and discernment. We pray in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor Miles. As a courtesy to speakers and guests in the meeting, please turn electronic devices to the silent or vibrate mode. Thank you. I would like to recognize the public officials and or staff representatives with us today. I would like to acknowledge from the LBB, the Legislative Budget Board, Katie Fallon Brown, Maggie Jebson, and Madison Gall. If you could please stand so we could appreciate you appropriately. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming here. Do we have any public officials or other staff representatives that we have overlooked? No. The Texas Board of Criminal Justice is committed to providing an opportunity for public presentations on posted agenda topics, as well as for public comments on issues within its jurisdiction as provided in Board Rule 151.4. Persons interested in speaking at today's meeting were required to complete and submit a registration card at least 10 minutes prior to the meeting's posted start time. As no cards were received prior to the required deadline, the board will not hear public presentations on posted agenda topics today. So let us move on to recognitions. Mr. Collier, I understand you would like to recognize Mr. Jason Clark, TDCJ's Chief of Staff, on his 15 years of service.
Thank you, Chairman O'Daniel. And I know Jason's making his way to the podium, but today I'd like to recognize Jason Clark on attaining 15 years of service to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Jason began his career with our agency in 2006 as the Public Information Officer. Prior to joining TDCJ, Jason had worked as a reporter and a producer and a news anchor in television news. In 2013, Jason was promoted to the Director of Public Information, serving as the agency's chief spokesman and managing agency communications. In 2017, Mr. Clark was promoted to Deputy Chief of Staff, and in 2018, he was promoted to the Chief of Staff for the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. As Chief of Staff, Mr. Clark oversees governmental affairs, executive services, communications, and records management. Mr. Clark also does a lot of heavy lifting in the agency and leads a large variety of projects on my behalf with other divisions and throughout the agency as we get special projects and initiatives that we push through. He is someone I absolutely count on daily to help lead and manage the agency. Jason holds a bachelor's degree in broadcast journalism from Sam Houston State University. Please join me this morning in congratulating him on 15 years of service. And as I didn't say this with the other group, but when you think Jason's at 15 years, that means he only needs to do 25 more. But at the same time, Jason and I think the group that we had earlier in the Correctional Institution Division presentation show you that the future of TDCJ is very bright.
Thank you, Mr. Collier. And Mr. Clark, congratulations, and thank you for all your hard work and dedication, but also I would just like to underline what Mr. Collier had to say. You have almost a unique set of abilities coming out of the world of journalism with your personality and your intellect and your writing skills and your discretion. And all of that put together is the kind of package that you rarely find in a journalist. And I mean that in a nice way, in a nice way. And so I just want to say thank you. I too appreciate all that you have done. And as you know, I call on you fairly regularly. So I appreciate all of your hard work and dedication. And let's get a photo. Thank you. CID Division Director Bobby Lumpkin has the next recognition of Mr. John Werner, CID's Deputy Director. Mr. Lumpkin, Mr. Werner, please join us at the podium. Mr. Lumpkin, please begin.
Thank you, Chairman O'Daniel, Mr. Collier, members of the board. It's my extreme honor this morning to honor John Werner on 30 years of service with the agency. And John started with the agency in 1992 as a correctional officer at the Ferguson unit, has held every rank within CID, served as the warden at the cell unit, at the Cole-Moore complex, at the Hughes unit, also served as the Region 3 director in Rocheron, and Deputy Division Director for CID over the last 2.5 years, where he oversees the operations of Region 3 and 4, which is the Rocheron area and the Beeville area, as well as CRO, Classification Records Office. I've had the absolute pleasure of knowing John since 2000. And I'll tell you, so I've known him for 20 of his 30 years, and you won't meet a more genuine and authentic man than John Werner. He is a go-to guy for many of our divisions that we work closely with day in, day out. He often talks about the winning mindset in leadership and the challenges that are faced in corrections today. He leads by example, and he absolutely is a joy to work with and very dependable. And today, again, just want to honor John on his 30 years and his great accomplishment.
Thank you, Mr. Lumpkin, and congratulations to you, Mr. Werner.
Yes, sir. Chairman O'Daniel, Mr. Collier, members of the board. It's an honor and a pleasure to be recognized today before the board for 30 years of service. I want to thank many of folks in this room because over my 30 years, they've been there with me in the trenches and given me the opportunities to excel as a supervisor and throughout my career and making this as a part of my family. Thank you very much.
Well, and I just want to say that I first got to know you when you were the warden at the Hughes unit, and I was also very impressed, and I just want to underline what Mr. Lumpkin said about being, you're not going to find a more authentic individual than you, and you're not going to get away either, because we got to take a picture.
Yes, sir.
The Texas Board of Criminal Justice recognizes Tdcj employees who have dedicated 25, 30, 35, and 40 years of service to the state of Texas. These individuals represent the strong commitment of this agency staff system-wide. I, along with my fellow board members and Executive Director Brian Collier, express our deepest gratitude for their continued service. During the months of January and February, 64 employees attained 25 years of service, 15 employees attained 30 years of service, 17 employees attained 35 years of service, 1 employee attained 40 years of service, and 1 employee attained 45 years of service. Today, I would like to individually recognize the employees who have attained over 40 years for their dedication and service. First, Mr. Fernando Morales began his career with the Texas Department of Criminal Justice on September 15, 1980, upon graduation from the academy. Mr. Morales was assigned to the Darrington unit as a correctional officer, where he worked all duty posts. After a year, he transferred to the Transportation Department at the Wynn unit in Huntsville, where he was trained to drive an 18-wheeler. A year later, Mr. Morales transferred to the Central Unit Transportation Department in Sugar Land. Through the years, he has learned all the possible routes to and from all units in Texas, from the Huntsville area to San Antonio, all the way down to the Rio Grande Valley. He has hauled heavy equipment, livestock, grain, groceries, and furniture, and has also trained officers and inmates in truck driving. In 2000, the Central Unit held a truck driving competition called the Truck Rodeo. Why aren't we doing that now? I want a truck rodeo, where Mr. Morales won the championship. His prizes included a trophy, jacket, and cap that he still has and is very proud of today. Mr. Morales retired from the agency in 2010 with 30 years of service. After a year and a half, he missed being on the road and was rehired by his old department. He remained at the Central Unit until it closed and the department was transferred to the Terrell Unit in Roche-Sharon, where a new freight transportation facility was built and where he continues to work today. Next, John West received his Doctor of Jurisprudence in May of 1969 at the University of Texas Law School. He began his career in public service in July of 1969 at the State Department of Public Welfare as an appeals analyst prior to becoming an assistant district attorney in Bell County. Mr. West's passion for the law is also extended to teaching the law, and he spent several years teaching students about law enforcement at Lamar University in Beaumont. He spent a few years in Fort Worth and Garland and was a legal advisor before going into private practice in Dallas. The call to public service returned, and Mr. West began his career at the Texas Department of Public Safety in June of 1981 as an assistant general counsel, promoting to general counsel and then chief of legal services for DPS. In February of 1998, Mr. West became the general counsel of the Office of the Inspector General, formerly known as the Internal Affairs for the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, where he continues to serve the great state of Texas. Congratulations to Mr. West for your 45 years of service. And I want to say thank you for the perseverance, integrity, courage, and commitment to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, and I would like to add that the names of these employees will be submitted for inclusion in the official minutes of the board meeting. The Texas Board of Criminal Justice congratulates each of these employees and thanks you for your unwavering loyalty and dedication to the citizens of Texas. As a symbol of our appreciation, each of you will receive a board certificate along with a personal letter of gratitude. Now we will move to consent items. Today's proposed consent items include an excused absence for Dr. Rodney Burrow from the December 10th, 2021 meeting due to personal business. Are there any amendments, objections, or abstentions to the proposed consent items? Hearing none, the consent items posted for this meeting's agenda will stand approved. The next item on the agenda will be a report from the Tdcj Executive Director, Mr. Collier. I understand you have 3 topics for us today. If you're ready, please proceed.
Thank you, Chairman O'Daniel. I'll begin with an update on correctional officer staffing. We have continued to see increases in our application numbers and have noted a sizable increase in visits to our correctional staffing website, increasing from just under 30,000 visits in December to over 64,000 visits in January. The Warden's direct hire program is averaging 125 hires per month and continues to gain momentum. Our retention specialist held over 2,200 interactions with correctional officers on the 12 units where they're assigned, and we've received 345 applications for our new mobile correctional officer teams. We participated in 209 hiring events during the last quarter and anticipate that number increasing this quarter. We are projecting to hire 545 in February and 678 for the month of March. To assist in the daily unit staffing challenges we have, Mr. Lumpkin has established a staffing command center, which is tracking and managing the day-to-day staffing needs and movement statewide for our facilities. I'll keep continuing to update you on our progress in correctional officer staffing as it remains our #1 operational priority. I also want to update you on COVID-19. Over the past 60 days, we have experienced another wave of COVID as the Omicron variant moved throughout the state. During this wave, we saw our COVID positive numbers increase for both our staff and inmates. However, the duration and the symptoms were shorter for many of them. We continue to offer COVID vaccine boosters as well as regular COVID vaccines to staff and inmates, and we remain diligent with our COVID-19 protocols. We have added 9 more units to the 70% or higher vaccination rate bracket and have a total of 40 units in that category today. At these locations, operations are as they were pre-COVID. Sadly, since our last meeting, we have lost 10 staff members to COVID. Mark Loken, correctional officer at the Huntsville unit. Adrian Harding, equipment operator at the Wynn unit. Armando Rodriguez, clerk at the Fort Stockton unit. Carlos Moreno, correctional officer at the Hughes unit. Alfredo Urbinia, Jr., correctional officer at the Ney unit. Daryl Avery, food service manager at the Hutchins State Jail. Jonathan Glover, correctional officer at the Torres unit. John Broadway, correctional officer at the Jordan unit. Kay Zieger, Jr., correctional officer at the Dalhart unit. And Curtis Wollam, administrative assistant for the private facility, contract monitoring and oversight division. These 10 employees lost their battle with COVID-19, however, will never be forgotten for their bravery and commitment to public safety and for the ultimate sacrifice they each paid. We continue to pray for their families and coworkers who still mourn each of these losses, and we will honor each of them at our fallen officer service later this year. We have also lost 14 inmates since our last board meeting due to COVID-19, and we offer our prayers to their families during this time. Mr. Chairman, I also wanted to update you on inmate transportation. And beginning on March 1st, we will formally move the operations of inmate transportation from the Correctional Institutions Division to the Manufacturing, Agribusiness, and Logistics Division. This realignment will place inmate transportation and fleet transportation within the same division to allow for a comprehensive approach to moving inmates and goods throughout the system. Last year, between both operations, our drivers logged over 10 million miles on Texas roads. Mr. Lumpkin and Mr. Hirsch have been working closely with the leadership of both divisions to help ensure that a smooth transition will occur. Mr. Chairman and members, that does conclude my report.
Thank you, Mr. Collier. Are there any questions or comments from the board? The next item on the agenda is the chairman's report. It is with a heavy heart that I am again paying tribute to those lost to this terrible virus. In the words of 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 7, they have fought the good fight, they have finished the race, they have kept the faith. The men and women we will honor today played important roles both inside and outside the prison walls. They are more than a statistic. They were husbands, fathers, a wife, mother, and friends. Each leaves behind someone who loved them. Each leaves a void that is hard to fill. Please allow me a few minutes to tell you about them. First is Adrian Harding. Truckers are sometimes referred to as modern-day cowboys, and Adrian Harding was one of them. In fact, he even had a passion for the rodeo circuit in his younger days. Adrian grew up in the trucking industry at his father's side, where he was barely big enough to look over the steering wheel. For decades, Adrian loved being a part of the transportation industry. He came to work for the agency in January 2020 after traveling the country's roadways as an independent trucker. He was well liked by everyone he worked with at the Wynn Freight Terminal in Huntsville. He loved telling stories about his trucking experiences and was always willing to pass along his knowledge to other drivers. Co-workers described him as extremely dependable, hardworking, and approachable. He always took the time to speak with anyone that he met with a broad smile on his face. He enjoyed life and seemed to bring the laughter every day in almost any situation. Known as Gator, and I don't know if we're going to find out what that was, Gator to his many friends, co-workers, and relatives, he loved to go fishing or watch wrestling on TV or play a good hand of cards or dominoes. It's said that he could turn any night into a fun one with his playful smile and competitive spirit. Adrian has 14 grandchildren and 8 great-grandchildren. His wife, Beatrice, was the one constant in his life. Sadly, she passed from the virus just 5 days after Adrian. Adrian Harding, age 67, died from the coronavirus on January 10th, 2022. Next, Mark Loken. Years of working as a correctional officer leads to knowledge and respect. Such was the case with Correctional Officer 5, Mark Loken, at the Huntsville unit, who had almost 4 decades of Tdcj experience to share with the staff at the Walls. Officer Loken started his employment with the agency in January 1982 at the Eastham, now the Wainwright unit, and retired in August 2003. But he just couldn't stay away and returned to work in January 2004 at the Goree unit and then resigned in July 2015. But once again, the call of the job brought him back, and in August 2016, he was assigned to the Huntsville unit. Officer Loken enjoyed going to the shooting range on his days away from the Huntsville unit. He also loved to go fishing, as we just saw, and he was especially proud of his chickens that he raised at his home near Huntsville. A U.S. Army veteran, he had 3 sons, 1 daughter, and 11 grandchildren. Huntsville Unit Senior Warden Dennis Crowley said he loved his job, and he was loved by everyone at the Walls. We were blessed to have him on our staff the last several years. Officer Mark Loken, age 68, died from the coronavirus on January 10th, 2022. Next, Armando Rodriguez. There are certain people in our lives who leave a lasting impression on us, and such is the case with Armando Rodriguez. He was a mentor to many young people in West Texas before they began their careers with the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Mr. Rodriguez, who was also known as Mr. Rod or Mondo, was an employee of the Fort Stockton Independent School District for 28 years before his employment with the agency. He was a teacher, coach, counselor, bus driver, and principal who touched many lives throughout the Fort Stockton area. A lifelong resident of that area, he got his bachelor's degree and master's degree from Sul Ross State University in Alpine. After his time in public education, he was a jail administrator for the Pecos County Sheriff's Department for a couple of years, and then went to work for the Windham School District in February 2004. In November 2005, he began working as a clerk in the Fort Stockton Unit Count Room. In October 2013, he was promoted to Case Manager 3 until he resumed responsibilities as a clerk in the Count Room in February 2014, where he remained until his ultimate passing. Mr. Rodriguez was an avid golfer, but his true passion was working in the yard. He could not stand to see a weed pop its ugly head out of the ground before whacking it off, and that's me too. I like doing that. He also loved working on honeydews. All right, well, that wasn't me. But that his wife, Delma, assigned to him around the house. And even though he was a Sul Ross graduate, he enjoyed watching the University of Texas football games on Sundays. All right, now that is me right there. Fort Stockton Senior Warden Benny Bundy said, Mr. Rodriguez always put others first and was as generous as they come. He had a great sense of humor and was known for joking with anyone he met. You can see that on his picture there. His constant smile was contagious, and he will be greatly missed by all of us at the Fort Stockton unit. Armando Rodriguez, age 78, died from the coronavirus on January 16, 2022. Carlos Moreno. Some folks know that they want to do from the moment they are old enough to work because they have such strong family ties to a certain career or a place of employment. That was the case for Carlos Moreno, Correctional Officer 4 at the Hughes Unit. Carlos came to work for Tdcj in November 1990 at the Memorial Unit, and a few years later, he moved over to the Hughes Unit in Gatesville. He was there until May 2016, but the lure of the job called him back in November of that same year. Carlos was part of what we call the Tdcj family in more ways than one. His two sisters, Blanca Evans and Miranda Moreno, and his brother Victor Moreno, had also worked at the Hughes Unit. Officer Moreno had taken some time off from work on January 5th to care for a loved one who had tested positive for COVID-19, and during that time, he also tested positive. He was hospitalized on January 11th. Hughes Unit Senior Warden Bruce Armstrong said, Officer Moreno was an amazing officer who was always uplifting and positive while on the job, as well as away from it. He would do anything for anybody. When he was not working his shift at the Hughes Unit, Officer Moreno enjoyed fishing and hunting or being with his family. He especially enjoyed watching his favorite football team on TV, the Dallas Cowboys. Officer Carlos Moreno, age 56, died from the coronavirus on January 22nd, 2022. Next, Alfredo Urbinia. There are some Tdcj employees who work through great adversity to continue doing their jobs, and such was the case with Alfredo Urbinia Jr. at the NAY unit. Alfredo was a Correctional Officer 5 who was dealing with some serious health issues during the pandemic, but that did not deter him from coming to work and fulfilling his assignments. He always put others first and mentored many of the officers on the unit, said NAY Unit Assistant Warden Luis Hernandez. He was respected by his peers as well as the inmate population. He never complained and was a real motivator to everyone he met, he added. Alfredo began his Tdcj career at the Catulla unit in September 1995 as a correctional officer. In December 1996, he transferred to the NAY unit. He promoted to Correctional Officer 4 in December 2000, and in December 2004, he promoted again to Correctional Officer 5. He retired in May 2020 and was rehired in April 2021 with his assignment back to the NAY unit. When he was not at the NAY unit, Officer Urbinia had a passion for riding motorcycles or going fishing. But his greatest joy was spending time with his children, Amanda, Alejandro, Abram, and Alfredo III, and especially his grandchildren, Anika, Seraphine, and Cesar. Alfredo Urbina Jr., age 51, died from the coronavirus on January 24, 2022. Tammy Martinez. The coronavirus pandemic has affected people in all walks of life over the past 2 years, but none more than those in the healthcare profession, especially nurses who are on the front line 24/7, caring for the sick in hospitals, nursing homes, and yes, even prisons. Tammy Martinez, a nurse at the Michael unit, was someone who cared deeply for all her patients. Tammy began her nursing career with the University of Texas Medical Branch as a patient care assistant at the Cofield unit in March 2006. In 2009, she promoted to a licensed vocational nurse at the Michael unit. In 2013, she transferred to the Beto unit, and in March 2018, she transferred back to the Michael unit. In August 2019, she promoted to a nurse clinician at the Michael unit and continued her education by receiving her Bachelor of Science degree. Pam Pace, practice manager at the Michael unit, said, "Tammy strived each day with whatever her role was to be the best advocate for the patient, as well as UTMB and TDCJ. She was a compassionate, determined person who never gave up achieving her dreams." Tammy had more than just a career connection to TDCJ. Her husband, Joe Martinez, is a retired TDCJ employee. When she wasn't on the job, Tammy loved to take trips with her family and friends, usually wearing a large sombrero-style hat. Her world was her family. She enjoyed spending time with her 5 daughters, Casey, Maria, Jessica, Tabitha, and Heather, and her many grandchildren. Tammy Martinez, age 51, died from the coronavirus on January 27, 2022. Daryl Avery. Cooking was one of Daryl Avery's greatest joys. He enjoyed it so much, he turned it into a career with TDCJ. Daryl was a food service manager at the Hutchins State Jail near Dallas. Daryl began his TDCJ career in 2014 as a correctional officer at the Powledge unit. Not too long afterwards, he took the food service manager 3 position at the Hutchins State Jail. Spending time with his family, especially his daughter Clarice Avery, was his favorite thing to do when he was not on duty. He was always very devout in his faith and enjoyed spending time at his church and with his fellow church members. Cooking was another favorite hobby, and if he was watching any sports, it was his favorite basketball team, the Dallas Mavericks. He was an outstanding correctional professional who stood out among his peers, said Hutchins State Jail Senior Warden Frederick Merida. He was dependable and took great pride in always doing the job right, he added. Daryl Avery, age 55, died from the coronavirus on February 6, 2022. Jonathan Glover. Since the day he entered the academy, Jonathan Glover knew that being a correctional officer was the job for him. He embraced it and became a mentor to others seeking the same career over the years. Jonathan Glover joined TDCJ in September 2012 and was always assigned to the Torres unit in Hondo. Assistant Warden Luis Hernandez said, "Officer Glover mentioned many officers over the years and mentored them and always put others first. He was a real motivator to everyone on the unit and he never complained." One of Officer Glover's co-workers said, "He was easygoing and easy to talk to despite being a man of few words." They also said that he was a team player. When Jonathan was not on duty, he enjoyed spending time with his wife, 2 sons, and a daughter. Their favorite activity was playing video games or traveling. He also enjoyed trying out new foods, and when it came to sports, he was a fan of the Houston professional teams, the Texans, the Astros, and the Rockets. Jonathan Glover, age 43, died from the coronavirus on February 6, 2022. John Broadway. Sometimes you work with someone who's just an all-around great person to have by your side, and that's exactly who John Broadway was. John Broadway was a correctional officer 4 at the Ruth Jordan unit in Pampa, where it's a tight-knit group of officers who are always there for each other through thick and thin. John began his Tdcj career in 2016 and was always assigned to the Ruth Jordan unit. Senior Warden Robert Almanza said, John was a dedicated correctional officer who was always willing to help anyone in need. He had a great attitude and a positive spirit. Correctional Officer 4, Tammy Johnson, was one of John's co-workers. She said, he was so laid back and good-natured. He was just a real likable person to be around, and he didn't mind being the brunt of my jokes every now and then either. When he wasn't on duty, Officer Broadway kept busy with his hobbies of boating and gardening. But what he enjoyed more than anything else was being with his family. He was married for 21 years to his wife, Sue Ann, and they had 5 children, Matt, Kara, Wyatt, Scott, and Ryan. And he has 15 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren. John Broadway, age 68, died from the coronavirus on February 8th, 2022. K. Zieger. There's a saying, I wasn't born in Texas, but I got here as fast as I could. That may have been something that K. Zieger said when he arrived at the Dalhart unit to begin his career with Tdcj. K. Zieger was born in Germany and raised in Ohio. He would later move to California and Arizona before eventually settling in God's country, Texas. That's when he joined the agency as a correctional officer at the Dalhart unit in March 2014. Officer Zieger tested positive for the virus on February 7, 2022, and was admitted to the hospital in Dalhart on February 13th. Senior Warden Joe Tover said, Officer Zieger was a quiet, private person, but he had a strong personality. His co-workers thought of him as a father figure as well as a respected brother in gray. He was reliable and a great asset to all of us at the Dalhart unit. When not working the night shift at the Dalhart unit, Officer Zieger enjoyed spending time with his dogs and shooting his guns at a nearby range. He is survived by his brother Kevin Zieger, who lives in Arizona. K. Zieger, age 60, died from the coronavirus on February 13th, 2022. Curtis Wollam. Curtis Wollam was a dedicated employee of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Even when he had to take some time off from the agency for a serious medical condition, he always knew he would return. Curtis was born in Freeport, Texas in October 1968. He went on to serve his country proudly in the United States Navy for 5 years. In April 2002, Curtis went to work for Tdcj as a correctional officer at the Wainwright unit. He left in 2005 to deal with some health issues, but returned 13 years later to work at Tdcj in the Huntsville Placement and Release Parole Division until this past year. He was then promoted to an Administrative Assistant 3 with the Private Facility Contract Monitoring and Oversight Division. Curtis loved what he did and the people he worked with, said Private Facility Division Director Allison Dunbar. He was loved by so many and will truly be missed by all who knew him. Curtis enjoyed spending time with his family more than anything else. He was married to his wife, Mary, for over 30 years, and they had 2 children, their son, Dustin, and their daughter, Elizabeth, and a grandson, Trey. Curtis Wollam, age 53, died from the coronavirus on February 18th, 2022. The families of these heroes are mourning. And finally, let us keep in our prayers the families of the inmates who have also died from the virus. This too shall pass. I ask that you lift all of those hurting in your prayers to this difficult time. And now, if you will just give me a couple of more minutes, I would like to recognize some outstanding employees. As you know, regardless of the challenge, the work of the agency must go on. Tens of thousands of men and women get up each morning and carry out the mission of Tdcj. They don't ask for recognition, and much of their work goes unnoticed. Today, I will highlight a few individuals from Region 5 who exemplify the core values of this agency and get the job done. Throughout this pandemic, many people have stepped up and taken responsibility for the health and well-being of others, sometimes with no expectations of any payback for themselves. Such is the case with Damon Shipp, an agricultural specialist 4 at the Price Daniel unit in Snyder. Over the past year, Mr. Shipp has driven over 20,000 miles to gather supplies necessary for use during the pandemic. He has made the drive weekly from the Panhandle to Gatesville to pick up vital personal protective equipment that he delivers weekly to the Region 5 office in Plainview. And he did all this while still completing his regular duties at the Daniel unit. Born and raised in Fisher County, Damon attended school in Roby, Texas, where he was active in 4-H, FFA, and different sports. He got a great deal of satisfaction showing horses, steers, and pigs. He's been in agriculture all his life, and when he went to work for Tdcj in August 2013, he felt it would be an opportunity to change people's lives for the better. Damon is responsible for the agricultural operations at the Daniel unit and other facilities throughout Region 5. He plays an instrumental role in the green bean harvest. It is grown under contract and then harvested by the agency before being transported to the cannery at the Terrell unit in Roche-Sharon, where it is processed and ultimately consumed on facilities throughout the state. Damon said, "The most enjoyable part of my job is seeing the look on a young inmate's face who has never been involved in farming when a crop he planted comes up for harvest and he knows he's had a hand in it." Senior Warden Desi Mack at the Daniel unit said, "I've known Mr. Shipp for over 10 years. He makes the organization what it is today because he takes such pride in his job and always strives for excellence. He's always the first to volunteer with a helping hand, regardless of the situation. Even though he's a non-uniformed employee, he truly understands the concept of teamwork, which is greatly appreciated by everyone at the Daniel Union." Damon has been married for 38 years to his wife Shelby, and they have 2 daughters and 1 grandson. When he's not traveling across Texas or working in the field, he enjoys doing just about anything with horses, which includes training and showing them or judging at youth shows. He says his favorite sports team is whichever one that his grandson plays on. Next, Placido Ramirez. Oh, okay. And if we could have him come on up for a picture. As you can see, I have my own boss I have to answer to, so. Making a difference in people's lives is what drives Lieutenant Placido Ramirez. Whether it's on the job at the All-Red unit or away from work with young people in the greater Wichita Falls area, Lieutenant Ramirez and his 4 brothers were raised in Burke Burnett, Texas, where he graduated from the high school. After a friend persuaded him to apply for employment with Tdcj, he went to work for the agency in October 2005. He achieved the rank of sergeant in 2017, and at the end of December 2021, he promoted to lieutenant. Ramirez says what he enjoys the most about his Tdcj role is the relationships he builds with the other officers and letting them know that he will always have their backs. He says his biggest challenges are the turnovers in staffing and new officers not knowing certain duties, which Ramirez quickly helps them understand. He says he promoted later in his career because he wanted to do his part to make a positive change for the officers around him. That same attitude is carried over to his time away from the All-Red Unit. All-Red Unit Senior Warden Jimmy Smith says this about Ramirez. I can describe Lieutenant Ramirez with 4 character traits: compassion for helping those in need, flexibility, adjusting to change with a good attitude, resilience, recovering from adversity, and availability, willingness to change priorities to meet a need. Ramirez worked for a mentor for the Wichita Falls Independent School District, where his role was to hang out with young people that were either underprivileged or special needs. He says, I would bring them lunch and sit with them while we played games or read books or went outside on the playground for recreation. He was assigned 2 young men to mentor to help them with their homework and other areas related to their schooling. For his dedication to those young people, he was awarded the Mentor of the Year Award by the Wichita Falls Independent School District in 2015. When he's not on duty at the All-Red Unit or mentoring young people in Wichita Falls, Lieutenant Ramirez spends time with his family, which includes his wife of 24 years, Rihanna, who is a visual impairment teacher in Wichita Falls. They have an adult son, Anthony, and 4 grandchildren: Marcus, age 10, Faith, age 9, Kaisley, age 5, and Leia, age 3. Ramirez's favorite sports teams are the Dallas Cowboys, the Texas Rangers, and the Texas Longhorns. Those are mine too. That's a good set there. He says he tries to attend as many football games as possible, as well as baseball games. Let's give a hand to Lieutenant Ramirez. Some folks know what they want to do for a career at a very early age and then go on to achieve it as an adult. Such is the case with Irma Gonzalez, Correctional Officer 5 at the Bill Clements Unit in Amarillo. And I'm going to be there Sunday, so I'm looking forward to seeing you. She's always been interested in law enforcement and corrections. Officer Gonzalez was raised in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, but moved to the United States in 1998. She attended and graduated from Palo Duro High School in 2003. She continued her education at Amarillo College and the University of Phoenix with an emphasis on criminal justice. Her career with the Texas Department of Criminal Justice began as a wager when someone told her that she would not be able to handle a job in this field of work. Never backing down from a challenge, she embraced it and entered the Plainview Training Academy in 2010. Her intention was to experience the criminal justice system, understand it, and then move on to a career in law enforcement. But once she was in Tdcj, she saw the many opportunities available to her with the agency itself. When Officer Gonzalez graduated from the academy, her first assignment was at the Bill Clements Unit. She was uncertain of how long she would stay, but everything about Tdcj fascinated her, such as how an inmate is classified, their behavior during classification, as well as the pride that correctional officers have as a public servant. She also understood that she has a responsibility to ensure the safety and welfare of the inmates as well as her fellow officers. In 2011, Officer Gonzalez attended first aid training and became a member of the emergency response team. She also attended mentor training to help guide new Tdcj employees in their careers. In 2012, she was selected as a field force officer and attended horsemanship training in 2013. The next year, she attended key control and armory training and became the key control and armory officer. In 2018, she became the Clements Unit Field Training Officer, a position which she still holds. Officer Gonzalez said, "Dealing with inmates is a challenge all on its own. Knowing how to manage them while setting boundaries to accomplish the day's goals comes with a lot of responsibilities and decision-making, which can make the difference between being safe or being put in a precarious situation." She says what she enjoys the most about her job is keeping the inmates safe as well as her co-workers. Clements Unit Senior Warden Adam Rene Gonzalez said, "Officer Irma Gonzalez is the kind of employee every warden looks for because she exemplifies the agency's core values while upholding our policies and procedures with confidence. She's never too busy to assist others, even if it extends her day beyond her normal working hours." Field Training Officer Gonzalez truly believes that the Clements Unit is part of her own family. She's a true asset to the agency and stands ready to assist whenever the need arises. When not at the Clements Unit, Officer Gonzalez enjoys watching football and baseball games and spending time with her family. Her spouse, Deborah Tebow, is a former Tdcj employee. She and their 3 sons, Skylar, age 23, Delco, age 17, and Carlos, age 15, know that Irma's job comes with a risk and that it has its challenges. Officer Gonzalez concluded, "TDCJ opened up a whole new world of opportunities for me, and I'm especially grateful to my mentors who believed in me and gave me the opportunity to accomplish my goals for a successful TDCJ career." And so, Officer Gonzalez, if we could give a hand for her today, and we can have her come on up. And that concludes my remarks, but let's give one more round of applause for all 3 of these employees.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask for a moment?
Absolutely.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate that. In our hearts and minds, we will never forget the brave and dedicated members of our TDCJ family who have succumbed to the coronavirus. Those that we've recognized today, those that we've recognized in prior meetings. As a board, we've also recognized that it would be entirely appropriate to have a permanent physical memorial to honor those who have fallen in the line of duty and whose watches have ended. And so I thought it would be appropriate just to mention again as part of our meeting that there is an effort to raise funds to install a permanent memorial at the Texas Prison Museum. It will be the End of Watch Memorial. It is, and if you want more information about that project, you can go to the Texas Prison Museum website at www.txprisonmuseum.org. I also want to mention that as part of a little bit of a board challenge, our chairman has already stepped forward to make his own contribution. I know a number of us will be following along with the chairman to engage in that effort. and I'm seeing a check being written right next to me. And so, so I would commend that worthy effort to all those, not only in attendance, but those who will be looking at us online and reviewing our minutes. So thank you very much, Chairman, for your leadership on this and for giving me a few minutes to mention that.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Texas Prison Museum. Texas Prison Museum.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Thank you, Chairman. I just to tee off that, and Mr. Nichols, thank you very much for bringing that up. And I know all of you today, I know we put out information in the last few weeks, but the fundraising effort has begun. And they will actually be constructing a wall, much like what we've all known as the Vietnam Memorial, where you have names, and it will have those that passed away, unfortunately, due to COVID-19, but also recognize the lives of all those who have died in the line of duty throughout the agency's history. And that will be a permanent marker, unfortunately, that would be able to be added to at the Texas Prison Museum in Huntsville. And the fundraising campaign is kicked off. We've had a lot of staff involved in helping with the Prison Museum on creating that project, and we're grateful to them for working with us on it, because we've been working to try to identify the right way to be able to honor those, and this is a great way to step forward. So thank you very much for your support, and look forward to seeing that into the next few months. Thank y'all.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is a report from the Agricultural Advisory Committee. Mr. Billy Hirsch, Director of Manufacturing, Agribusiness, and Logistics, Mall Division, will be presenting today. Thank you for joining us. If you're ready, please proceed.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good morning, Chairman O'Daniel, Mr. Collier, members. I'm very honored to be here today on behalf of the Advisory Committee on Agriculture, representing Pastor Miles as the chair of that committee, to give you a little bit of rundown on what we've been doing and some of the things that have been occurring over the last year or so. A little over a year ago, we started putting this thing together, and we've really made some strides, I would think. So just a simple overview. Government Code 497.111 governs the Advisory Committee on Agriculture. It consists of 5 members, one of those members being a member of the Texas Board of Criminal Justice, who serves as the chairman, 1 faculty member from Texas A&M University, 2 citizens with knowledge of agriculture and appointed by the Texas Board of Criminal Justice, and then 1 citizen appointed by the Commissioner of Agriculture. We hold quarterly meetings, and we present twice a year. This is our first presentation that we'll be doing. The Government Code asks that the committee present to the board on agriculture operations, suggestions for new areas, and the use of inmate labor. As I previously mentioned, Pastor Larry Miles, current secretary on the board, is our committee chairman and doing a wonderful job. Dr. Cliff Lamb is the representative from Texas A&M University. He is the acting director of the Texas A&M AgriLife Research Department. He's been a very, very good resource for us. Walt Roberts, Walt is the Texas Department of Agriculture appointee. He is the Assistant Commissioner for Legislative Affairs and External Relations. Mr. Tom Fordyce, who several of the board members and people behind me are very familiar with, former Director of Agribusiness, Land and Minerals, and former Secretary on the board, is on that committee as well. And then Mr. Jay Brent, who is an entrepreneur, a 5th-generation rancher, a commodity exchanger, and owner of Public House Restaurant in Amarillo, Texas. We're very honored today to have Mr. Brent with us. If Mr. Brent will stand up and take a little recognition. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, our other board members, committee members couldn't make it today, but I think several of them are watching online, so thank y'all for what you do for us. And that's the committee there from left to right. Mr. Fordyce, y'all probably recognize. Of course, Mr. Brent, we just recognized. Pastor Miles, to his left is Walt Roberts, who is the Assistant Commissioner for Agriculture, and then the fellow there on the right is Dr. Cliff Lamb from Texas A&M University. Catch myself up. Our inaugural meeting was held in Huntsville. We met with the committee, did some meet and greet, and we let them meet all of our agriculture leadership, and did a very, very extensive overview of our agribusiness land and minerals. Had a slideshow, we presented them, and as I mentioned, we did the staff operations, or introductions, and then we went and toured the equine operations at the Goree unit, and just kind of give you a little rundown on that as we go through these on the things that we looked at. You know, our horse program at the Goree unit has about, our horse program at the Goree unit is where all the horses start. We breed all the horses there, so every horse that you see in the agency, it was born there on the Goree unit. So we have about 1,200 head agency-wide. 750 of those are used for security and line horses. 150 of them are stock horses we use for our ranching operations. 200 horses are always in some form of growing or training. We don't turn horses out to the field until they're at least 2 years old. And about 100 brood mares and stallions that we have there at the Goree unit. This year so far, we've had 23 foals on the ground. So last year we produced 89. And just as a little extra treat, we're planning a horse sale first week of June, June the 4th, there at Texas A&M University. So we'll have more information on that later on. All right. Our next meeting was held, as we said, we meet quarterly. Our next meeting was held on September the 9th, and we held that meeting out at the Buffalo Ranch. If you haven't had a chance to go to the Buffalo Ranch, I suggest you get out there and look around. We'd sure like to give you a look at what we got going on out there. It's 11,000 acres that we have under teal or in pasture grazing. Some of the topics that we discussed at that meeting, as seen there on the screen, were our harvesting operations, feral hogs, which are tremendously impacting agriculture operations, and the impact of COVID at that point in time on our inmate labor force. Of course, COVID still affects us to some extent. As Mr. Collier said, it looks like we're over the hump on that. And we also started looking at recommendations that the committee might start making in our agricultural operations. Our last meeting was held on December the 8th. We met back again in Huntsville because, if you remember, the board meeting was that same week, so we didn't want to travel somewhere else, and we needed to have a board meeting there. We also were trying to have a top hand award, which we'll cover a little bit later on, but that didn't pan out in December. We reviewed, again, operations for ag and started basically, consolidating what we wanted to present to the board today as far as recommendations. And then Pastor Miles had the idea that he wanted to show the committee what else TDC had to offer, TDCJ had to offer. So, of course, if you've been to Huntsville and you want to look at industry, the wind farm is the place you go. So we went there and we reviewed, we toured several of the facilities over there, including Science and Plastics, Graphics, the Tag Plant, the Chapel, faith-based programs, computer recovery, and we actually went outside. We do have some agriculture operations there and looked at our chicken houses. So at this point, we'll get to recommendations. I believe the actual government code says recommendations or suggestions. So we met with, of course, the committee on several different times and told them what our problems were and our issues were, and then they give us information and some feedback. So if the three that we looked at were tractors, the poultry operations, and Terrell Cannery. We probably had a whole lot more recommendations, but we kind of honed in on those three. We think those three are probably the, you can go ahead and turn it. Those three are probably the top ones right now that we're facing in with the agribusiness land and minerals. And you'll see a few pictures of some of our equipment as we talk about it. But our inventory of tractors in the agency is 387. Chairman, you asked me what the oldest one was. It's a 1965 model Ford model 8970. It's a 240 horsepower tractor that's located at the Buffalo Ranch.
That was made before me, so
yeah.
There you go.
That's a year older than me, and it's still working just like me too. So. But we have several old tractors in the agency, and that's just a result of, one, us being able to take care of those tractors, and of course the limited funds that we got to purchase new equipment. So some of the pictures you'll see a combination of some old and new equipment. We need about 213 to make our core operations. Of course, I said we had 387, and the reason we have 387 in agriculture business, when the window's open to plant or harvest or whatever it is that you're supposed to be doing, you've got to be able to go out there, turn the key on a tractor, and you've got to be able to go to work. So when you're using old equipment, you have to have backup equipment. So that's when we have so many tractors in the fleet. So that in itself was the recommendation from the committee, and we'd already been dibbling with that a little bit as far as leasing and renting tractors. So the committee suggested that we start leasing, and we've got a proposal right now. We're working with procurement to try to find out how we can lease tractors and try to cut down on some of our repair and get some of the motor tractors out of our fleet. You'll also see, I think Mr. Cerrito will present an audit at some point to the board, Audit 2108, that basically said the same thing. Okay, go to poultry. Our poultry operations, our goal is to produce, it's all laying hen, it's not for meat, it's only for egg. Our goal is about 1.5 eggs per offender per day is what we would like to see. Of course, if we produce more than that, we can eat it. You know, we can substitute it for something else. But in the agency right now, that's about 180,000 eggs a day that we need to produce. Our current houses are about 24 houses in the system, spread out over 6 units. Our oldest was a 1962 model, and the youngest is a 1983 model. So we have not built any houses in quite some time. So that, again, in itself kind of inspired the committee to start recommending some changes in our poultry operations. So we looking forward. We've already got a proposal in to try to build another chicken house or laying house. We're going to try to increase the population of our chickens. Right now, we're running about 270,000 hens. Compare that to about 30 years ago, we actually ran more than that. We had 45 houses with 370,000 hens. We depended a lot more on eggs back then than we do now, and I think we can get that number back up. Our next one is our cannery operations. The committee hadn't actually been to the cannery. We plan on going in March. We have another date in March the 18th. They'll see the cannery, but we've been able to provide them some information on the cannery. Our cannery was built in the 80s. A lot of the equipment is still the original equipment in there. We can green beans, carrots, yellow and butternut squash, sweet potatoes, white potatoes, leafy greens, pinto beans, and sauerkraut. So one of the challenges of the committee was, what else can you do and how much more can you produce? So we've already experimented and had a successful experiment on canning white potatoes. We can buy those. We may try to raise some too, but we can buy those and can them so that the units can have them as a backup. We always try to feed fresh food first, and then frozen food, and then our canned foods in that order because of the perishability of the products. Our objectives, as I mentioned, in the cannery operations is about 300,000 cases a year. So we're going to try to increase that. Of course, that's going to cost a little bit of some extra resources that we hope to get in the near future. And that's about all the recommendations we got. I just know that Pastor Miles has been very instrumental in sharing a vision, and the biggest vision, and I didn't really mention it, and I probably should have, is his vision to rebrand agriculture, the Texas Department of Criminal Justice Agriculture Department. We've kind of been forgotten for a long time, and I think we're bringing that to light. So I'd like to thank him for his leadership on that committee, bringing all those things forward to the agency. And lastly, I kind of mentioned a little bit, we had a Top Hand Award where we had the actual Agriculture Commissioner, Mr. Sid Miller, came out a couple weeks ago and presented 25 of our employees Top Hand Awards. He actually awarded several of us, Mr. Collier included, honorary Agriculture Commissioner awards as well. But event went off really well. I thank all the people that participated. We had several of the Agriculture Advisory Committee members there, including Pastor Miles and his wife. Mr. Fordyce was also there, and Mr. Roberts, of course, was there too. So it went off really, really well. Just a big thank you to all those people that participate on that committee and volunteer. It's a non-paid committee like y'all are used to, and they do a very wonderful job of doing it. So I'm going to yield the floor to Pastor Miles to say a few closing comments.
Yes, sir. You know, it was a challenge for me at first when the chairman asked me to do this. I mean, I'm a pastor. I know how to grow the kingdom, but I'm limited in the other aspects. But working with Mr. Hirsch I mean, he just made it easy for us to come together. Our committee has gelled together very well. And we're looking forward to moving things forward on the ag side of Tdcj. One of the things that I did not know at the time, and I'm sure a lot of our board members do not know, is how hard the men and women of ag for Tdcj work. Their job is not 8 to 5. Their job is from can to can't. And a lot of these guys, due to the labor shortage that we have, I mean, a lot of these guys are out in the field driving the tractors and making things happen. And that's the way we get it done. At the Top Hand Award, I told this story. The year was 1974, and I was a newly discharged from the United States Army, and I was running around in Amarillo, Texas, and met a young lady and struck up a conversation with her, and I said, well, where do you live? I'm gonna come visit you. And she said, well, I live on a farm north of Panhandle. I said, a farm? She said, yeah. She told me how to get there. So I drove out there the next day, pulled up at the farmhouse, and nobody was there. And then a tractor come driving up, and it was Becky driving that tractor in a bikini. Now, all of a sudden, I was interested in Texas agriculture. It's amazing how those things work. And I would have never thought that 47 years later I'd get another chance to be involved in Texas agriculture. And so I want to thank Mr. Hirsch. I want to thank Jay Brent. Jay and I worked together in our church, Trinity Fellowship Church. We're elders together, but he is a 5th generation rancher in the Texas Panhandle and a career in the commodities, and so he knows what's going on. And we've got a great committee, and I hope that we can push forward these recommendations for ag and Tdcj. Thank you, Mr. Hirsch.
Thank y'all. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Mr. Hirsch, and thank you, Pastor Miles, for those remarks, even though they will have to be heavily redacted. But thank you nonetheless. Are there any other comments? Not. All right, the next item on the agenda is the discussion, consideration, and possible action regarding purchases and contracts over $1 million. Mr. Ron Steffa, Chief Financial Officer, will be presenting today. If you're ready, please proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman, board members, Mr. Collier. The purchases can be found on page 17. It's behind tab F of your packet. I have 6 items to bring forward for your consideration today. The first 5 are renewals for existing residential reentry services contracts that we have. If extended, they would be operated through Core Civics, and it would cover the areas of Del Valle near Austin, Dallas, El Paso, and Fort Worth, and it would be then starting for fiscal year 23. The 6th item is for the procurement of electricity. This electricity covers those units. We have 45 units in deregulated areas in which we can bid out the procurement. As we have in the past, this would be through a reverse auction process in which the vendors are pre-qualified. Then we hold that reverse auction in which they bid in reducing price increments. And then once we have a winner, they'll actually bid in 3, 4, and 5-year terms, and we would choose that term and bid that is the best value for the state of Texas, and then that award would go forward for that period. We're also seeking a 10% variance that would accommodate both the bid amount and any variance in usage during that time frame. And I'll pause for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Steffa. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, thank you. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Texas Board of Criminal Justice approve the purchases and contracts over $1 million as presented.
I have a motion. Is there a second? A motion has been made, has been seconded by Judge Johnson. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Steffa. Our next item on the agenda is the Internal Audit Status Report. Mr. Chris Torito, Director of Internal Audit, will be presenting today. If you're ready, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members, Mr. Collier. I will be brief today. I have one update to your status report, and that update is consistent with Mr. Collier's commitment that staffing is the #1 priority for the agency. We are going to conduct a walkthrough on correctional officer recruitment. Once we've completed that walkthrough, we'll take a look at the results and determine if we need to modify the annual audit plan to conduct additional work. And with that, I'll pause for any questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Cerrito. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Thank you again. Thank you for the status report. The next agenda item is the discussion, consideration, and possible action regarding proposed land transaction, request for access driveways, water line, and water meter easements at the Stiles Unit, Jefferson County, Beaumont, Texas. Mr. Billy Hirsch will be presenting today. If you're ready, you may proceed.
Yes, sir. Thank you, and good morning, Chairman Daniel, Mr. Collier, members. We have one item on the agenda for 3 separate easements, all co-located on the Stiles Unit in Jefferson County, Beaumont, Texas. These easements will provide vehicle access and water to a proposed truck driving training facility. Lamar State College, Port Arthur is requesting 2 easements for access driveways in the city of Beaumont for a water line and water meter to provide water to the proposed facility. If you direct your attention to the screen, I know it's pretty difficult to see, but as noted with the black markers on the map, the first 2 easements, tracks 1 and 3, are requested by the Lamar State College, Port Arthur. They consist of 0.3114 of an acre combined and will be used for ingress and egress driveways to the proposed facility. The third easement includes tracks 2 and 4 combined. Tracks 2 adjacent to track 1 is requested by the city of Beaumont, being 0.0233 of an acre, and will be used for a 2.5-inch water line to supply water to the proposed facility. Track 4, requested by the city of Beaumont, also adjacent to track 1, is 0.0045 acre of an acre, will be used for the water meter to that facility. It's noted in red, just to the west of track 1 is an easement that will be abandoned by Jefferson County. However, the easement noted in red to the far east will be retained by Jefferson County. The tracks in red are for informational purposes only, as the board previously granted those easements in August of 2020. Lamar State College, Port Arthur, and the city of Beaumont request a term of 30 years with no compensation. I would like to point out that these easements include language requiring indemnification as the grantee's responsibility, the most favored nation clause, and general liability insurance coverage for a minimum of $3 million. We recommend the Texas Board of Criminal Justice approve these projects for easements to Lamar State College, Port Arthur, and the city of Beaumont. I stand available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hirsch. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, thank you. Do you have do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Texas Board of Criminal Justice approve the request for access driveways, water line, and water meter easements at the Stiles Unit, Jefferson County, Beaumont, Texas, as presented.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
A motion has been made. It has been seconded by Mr. Nichols. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Our next agenda item is the discussion, consideration, and possible action regarding Facilities Division construction projects, request to replace roofs at the Jester 3 Unit, Fort Bend County, Richmond, Texas. Facilities Director, Mr. Cody Genzel, will be presenting today. Mr. Genzel, thank you for joining us. Please proceed.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Collier, members. I have 3 projects I will be presenting today. The first project for consideration is to replace the roofs at the Jester 3 Unit. This will consist of removing approximately 157,750 square foot of existing roofing system and replacing with a new galvanized steel panel 22-gauge roofing system to meet energy conservation requirements, building codes, and standards, along with the repair and replacement of all existing mechanical equipment. 3 bids were received for this project in December of 2021. If approved, the work will be performed by Gutierrez LLC out of Houston, Texas. Total estimated program cost is $11,249,300. Construction duration for this project is estimated 384 days, and this roof is currently 40 years old that's on the Jester 3 unit. It has been patched, but has not been totally replaced. This is a hub vendor, and this particular vendor, this will be their second project with us. They're currently working on our Clemens unit structural replacement of the floor and plumbing system for B building at this time. So asking permission to move forward with total program approval cost of $11,249,300.
Thank you, Mr. Gensel, but it sounds like the roof's not as old as me, though. All right, are there any other questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, thank you. Do I have a motion?
Yes, sir. I move that the board approve the request to replace the roofs on the Jester 3 unit in Fort Bend County.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
A motion has been made. It has been seconded by Ms. Perryman. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. The next agenda item is the discussion, consideration, and possible action regarding Facilities Division construction projects, request to replace roof at the Estelle Unit Textile Mill, Walker County, Rocheron, Texas. Mr. Gensel, please proceed.
Yes, sir. Thank you. The next project for consideration is to replace the roof of the textile mill at the Estelle unit. This project will consist of removing approximately 36,000 square feet of existing roofing systems and replacing with all new insulation and polyvinyl chloride membrane to meet energy conservation requirements, building codes, and standards, along with the repair and replacement of all mechanical equipment. 2 bids were received for this project in January 2022. If approved, this work will be performed by LD Tibbing Company Incorporated out of Austin, Texas. Total estimated program cost is $2,392,200. Construction duration is estimated at 165 days, and the age of this particular roof is 37 years. This is the first project by LD Tibbin for Tdcj. Asking permission to move forward for a total program cost of $2,392,200.
Thank you, Mr. Gensel. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, thank you again. Do I have a motion?
Yes, sir. I move that the Texas Board of Criminal Justice approve the request to replace the roofing system at the Estelle Unit Textile Mill, Walker County, Huntsville, Texas.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made. It has been seconded by Judge Johnson. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. The next agenda item is the discussion, consideration, and possible action regarding Facilities Division construction projects. Request to replace roofs at the Ramsey Unit, Brazoria County, Rocheron, Texas. Mr. Gensel, please proceed.
Thank you, sir. The final project for consideration is to replace the roofs at the Ramsey unit. This will consist of removing approximately 31,720 square feet of existing roofing system and replacing with all new insulation and polyvinyl chloride membrane to meet energy conservation requirements, building codes, and standards, along with the repair and replacement of all mechanical equipment. 3 bids were received for this particular project in January of 2022. If approved, the work will be performed by Atlas Universal Incorporated out of Houston, Texas. Total estimated program cost is $2,808,000. Construction duration is estimated at 270 days. This particular section of the roof has not been replaced in 27 years. This is a hub vendor, and this will be the first Tdcj project for the Atlas Universal Incorporated Group. Asking permission now to move forward with a total program cost of $2,808,000.
Thank you, Mr. Gensel. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, thank you. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Texas Board of Criminal Justice approve the request to replace roofs at the Ramsey Unit, Brazoria County, Rocheron, Texas.
Thank you. I have a motion. Is there a second? Oh, a motion has been made. It has been seconded by Judge Francis. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. And thank you, Mr. Gensel.
Thank you, sir.
The next item on the agenda is the discussion, consideration, and possible action regarding proposed revisions to Board Policy 01.04, Standards of Conduct for the Texas Board of Criminal Justice, and the Executive Director of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. General Counsel Ms. Kristen Moorman will be presenting. Thank you for joining us. If you are ready, you may begin.
Good morning, Chairman, Mr. Collier, and board members.
The board policy BP 0104 is before you today for revisions to implement Senate Bill 282 that was enacted in the 87th legislative regular session in 2021. This act created Texas Government Code Section 576.001 that prohibits appropriated funds from being used to settle or otherwise pay a sexual harassment claim made against a TBCJ member or an employee who serves as a staff for a TBCJ member. Those revisions are on page 36 of your materials that add section 9A3, and additional grammatical and formatting updates were also made to this policy.
Thank you, Ms. Warman. Are there any questions? Hearing none, thank you again. Do I have a motion?
Yes, sir. I move that the Texas Board of Criminal Justice approve the revisions to Board Policy 01.04, Revision 13, Standards of Conduct for the Texas Board of Criminal Justice and the Executive Director of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. I have a motion. Is there a second? A motion has been made, has been seconded by Pastor Miles. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Ms. Warman. I would like to thank all of you for coming here today and remind you the next meeting of the Texas Board of Criminal Justice will be Friday, April 22nd, 2022 in Austin, Texas. There being no further business, the 221st meeting of the Texas Board of Criminal Justice is now adjourned. It is 11:41. Enjoy Lubbock.